with Apple, we're going to need a Mac. And this can be a Mac laptop, Mac mini, so long as it's running Mac OS. So a lot of the stuff in this video is not going to work if you're running Linux or Windows. For that reason, this video is aimed at people who might not use Mac as their primary operating system. So there will be some steps we'll take, such as signing into some services that you may be able to skip as a regular Apple user. So first up, let's make sure we're logged into iCloud. Clicking on this little Apple icon up here, System Settings, give that a second to load. And up here, this is where you can sign in. So if you're already signed in, you can continue. And I'm going to come in here and sign in. Next up, we'll need to install Xcode. So Quasar generates our iOS app code using Capacitor. Then Xcode, which we'll install now, is used to build our app and run it on an iPhone. And there's a good chance you already have Xcode installed if you're an Apple user. Otherwise, I'll show you how we can do that. Let's open up the App Store. And then I'm going to run a search up here for Xcode. And we want to make sure Xcode is installed. And while we're here, we also want Apple Developer to be installed. So next up, I'm going to open up Apple Developer, select my account in the bottom left here, and make sure I'm signed in. So I'm already signed in here, but there's a good chance that you won't be signed in if you're new to this. So you can go ahead and click on that button and then sign in. Okay, so next, let's open up Xcode, clicking here. And chances are you'll need to agree to a few things first. So you want to make sure that you've done all the setup you need to do for Xcode before we try and launch our app with Xcode from Quasar. Okay, let's close a few of these things out. We then need to install CocoaPods. And CocoaPods is kind of like the NPM of the Apple world. It's a dependency manager for languages like Swift and Objective-C. But honestly, you don't really need to know any of that. Quasar handles it all for us behind the scenes. You can check if it's installed by running pod. Now that gave me this menu to show me what pod can do. That means I have it installed. But if your command wasn't found and CocoaPods isn't installed, then you can run sudo gem install CocoaPods. I won't run that because it's already installed on my computer. And if you want to know how to install this without sudo, there are instructions on the CocoaPods website that shows you how to do that. Sweet. Now we'll be able to run our app with Xcode, and Quasar can use CocoaPods to make sure we have all the dependencies we need. Next, you'll want to make sure your Mac has permissions to install dev apps on your iPhone. And we can find these instructions by searching Enable Developer Mode iOS. Enable Developer Mode iOS. And for me, it's the second option here. So if you click on that, it's going to show you how to enable developer mode, which is going to allow us to transfer files from our Mac computer onto our iPhone. Okay, this is exciting. We're getting closer. Next, let's try running our app using Quasar. Rather than writing it in the terminal, let's quickly create something for this in our package.json so we can quickly run it in the future. How about dev:\iOS, and let's write the command for that. Hey Quasar, I want to develop an app. Please set the mode equal to Capacitor, and using Capacitor, I want you to target the iOS platform. Save that, open the terminal, and now we can say yarn dev:\iOS. Remember, if you're using NPM, it'll have to be npm run dev:\iOS. Okay, so back to using yarn. Let's go ahead and run that and see what happens. If you haven't done this already, then you'll want to set your Capacitor app ID. Now, I actually messed this up in my testing earlier on. You need to make sure that this website doesn't exist. I wrote in a website that does exist and it didn't work. So we want to put in a reverse URL for a website that either we own or doesn't exist. I'm going to do app.quasar.playground, and that should do. So I'll go ahead and run that. And now Quasar is going to get to work setting everything up for us in Capacitor. So you'll notice that it created this Capacitor folder, and inside of there, we have this iOS directory, which it's currently setting up for us. Okay, now that that's done, we select an external IP address. The reason we select an IP address here is that the iPhone app, when we're in dev mode, is going to connect to the dev server that we run here. And that's really cool because it means that as we make changes, Veet can then send those changes to our app. This is a really cool experience. It basically means we get to develop our app live when we're building iOS apps, just like what we did with the Android app. So let's go ahead and select an IP address there. And as a side note, you'll want to make sure that your iPhone is connected to the same network as your computer. Okay, so it opens up Xcode for us. And you'll notice up here, I've got a phone connected. I don't use iPhones, so I'm borrowing a friend's phone for this. My name is not David. And now we can go ahead and click on the play button. So you might have noticed we got a build fail pop-up. And over here, we can see that our build has failed. That's fine. I expected this to happen. If we click on this little error icon here, it will point us in the right direction. So the signing for app requires a development team. I'll click on that and notice here that no team is selected. You can go inside of there and then select a team. If you don't have one, it does actually make you one by default, which is a personal team here. So I'll click on that and let's try running it again. Play. The build was successful, but I'm predicting we'll still get one more error. So let's just give this a second to run. And there it is, could not launch the app. And the key to this error actually sits at the end here. Inadequate entitlements or its profile has not been explicitly trusted by the user. Basically, we need to do one more step to trust this computer on our iPhone. I'm going to do this right now, and I'll tell you what I'm doing. It might be slightly different depending on what version of iOS you're using. So first, I'm going to jump into Settings, and then General, and then Device Management. Now I can see my team there, so I'll select that, and then trust that team. Trust, and now that that's been done behind the scenes, I can go ahead and press OK here. Let's try running it again. And it worked. I now have the app running on my phone, and we can even see some of the stuff that's going on inside of a console here. Now, next up, let's just test something. Let's see if we can press the button and then make it so that it logs to the console. So we'll jump into the index page here. And how about when we click on this, we'll do a console.log because we want to make sure we can see these console logs to make development easier in the future. It logged. Exclamation mark, save. One of the cool things about using Capacitor, I don't have to build our whole app again. I can just jump back in here, click on that button, and we can see the log shows up. Another way to work with the console, and I prefer this method, is to open up Safari. Spotlight search, Safari, get that opened up. And if we come up to develop here, we can see the device that's connected to my computer. And there we go, that's the app that's currently running. And now I'm going to click on that button on my phone and it shows up down the bottom here. We get a lot of extra tooling here as well, like seeing out network requests, working with elements and getting an idea of the DOM tree. Lots of bits and pieces to make development a bit easier. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed this one. Now you know how to build iOS apps using Quasar with Capacitor.